Hello. Today we're going to be talking about workflows and specifically those that are going to be found inside of the My Contact Center for Business or Mitel Customer Experience platforms. To begin, what are workflows? Basically, workflows set up the logical steps through which a call will process when it arrives at the MiCCB or MCX platform. Very high level, there are multiple different types of workflows that you can create and set up. We're going to be focusing specifically on the voice call workflow, but just know that there are a number of other different types of workflows that you can enable or set up and design, particularly ones that could do things like reach out and communicate with a database to pull across, say, customer information. You can use workflows that will allow you to change the mode of operation for the MiCCB or MCX platform. But all of these different workflows are going to pull from not necessarily the exact same set of tools and activities and objects, but there are going to be a number of them that are shared across each of these different types of workflows that can be set up. So the call routing or the voice call workflow is going to give us a really good base, a really good foundation that we can build on top of with the other more advanced workflow types. To begin programming and setting up a workflow, what you're going to first want to do is make sure that your MiCCB or MCX platform is licensed for IVR routing. Without that license in place, you will not have in the lower left-hand corner of your site explorer, you will not have the option to click on IVR routing. So if this option seems to be missing, it's likely because your license doesn't have or isn't doesn't have included with it the IVR routing license type. So if you don't see your IVR routing tab in the lower left-hand corner of your site explorer, your license just simply needs to be updated to grant you access to that function. Now, if you do have the IVR routing menu object, great. You're just going to simply click on that, and then you're going to come over to the main portion of your site explorer, and you're simply going to click the add button. So this add button will then open up what is basically a blank workflow that you can begin adding different objects and items to. And that's what we're going to look at here on the next part. So this is an example of what a completely configured workflow is going to look like. When you initially build your workflow, there will be no objects listed in this section. It'll simply be a white space that you can begin adding different objects to. So the overall kind of configuration process for a workflow simply comes down to selecting an object that you would like to, or an activity that you would like to add into your workflow, and then simply dragging and dropping it into the designer. Now, MiCCB and MCX do come standard with some default workflows already created. And in our example here, this is actually basically the default in queue workflow that you can use to manage incoming calls that come into the MiCCB or MCX. I do know that this looks quite complicated, but the most important thing to look at or understand when it comes to any workflows is that it is always going to go from the top to the bottom. And when there are two different objects or sections that seem to be at the same level, it is very likely because those two objects are going to offer a choice between one call scenario and another. What do I mean by that? Well, if we take a look here at our queue object, you'll notice that we have one branch listed for open, And then we have a second branch that's at the exact same level that's listed as D&D or closed. Now, I do want to point out that each of these branches have their own kind of self-contained logic that's going to be applied. So the is do not disturb or closed, if this branch is chosen, because the queue is either set to do not disturb or they're outside normal business hours, it's only going to concern itself. The logic is only going to be worried about what is contained within this particular branch. Similarly, if the center is open, it's going to be these particular objects inside of the open branch that are going to be, that the logic is only going to concern itself with. So with this particular example, what we're basically saying is calls will come in, it will hit the queue object, and then depending on whether the center is opened or closed, will determine which set of steps are going to be followed. And once again, once the choice or the selection is made as to whether you're going down the open branch or the closed branch, that same logic is just going to apply again. So it's going to work its way from the top to the bottom. So it's first going to offer the call to an agent group. If there are agents available, it will then offer to a specific agent. If for some reason there are no agents available, you potentially may see the logic for this flow down into the overflow activity stream or section. But once again, even though it looks like there's a lot of different potential kind of choices and options in here, it's really not that complicated when you realize it's only going to follow one path from the top to the bottom. And which path is taken is simply going to be based on fairly standard or basic details. Is the contact center open? Are there agents available? And if there are agents available, which agent is going to get the call? So always remember that when you're designing a workflow, it's going to go top to bottom. If there are two options that seem to be at the same level, or if they're on the same row, if you will, those are very often going to be choices between one condition and another. Now, once you have your workflow created, the next thing that is going to be really important is you're going to want some sort of way of engaging that workflow. Simply having a workflow created, designed, and saved on the MiCCB or MCX platform, that's not necessarily enough. You are still going to want to allow the MiCCB system to be able to route calls to those particular workflows. One of the easiest ways to do that is by implementing something called a DNIS condition or a DNIS match. So in our example here, this isn't the same queue workflow we were just looking at. It's something a little bit different, but you can see in this particular case that we have a DNIS entry for 6061. If a call comes into the MiCCB and it comes in from this address or from this digit string 6061, what will immediately happen is the caller will hear a greeting of some kind and then be directed to a menu. Now, it is likely, although it doesn't necessarily have to be done this way, that the menu selection options may be delivered through this greeting, although generally speaking, when you're setting up a menu structure within MiCCB, you're actually going to have a secondary announcement that's tied directly to the menu object that will present the different options. So press 1 for billing, press 2 for technical support, press 3 for account services. So the overarching goal here is that when calls come in, you want a way to get them to be directed to a specific workflow. Often that is going to be done through a DNIS match of some kind. And in terms of actually adding our DNIS entries to our DNS conditions to our workflows, depending on what particular workflow you are managing or trying to make this modification for, you're going to have to go to the specific activity, the specific workflow that you want the DNS match to be applied to, and apply it through that object's configuration. For this particular example that we are talking about, the DNS match is going to be added as an activity that is going to be tied to our inbound routing tab for a particular media server. So within your Site Explorer, you'll go to your enterprise menu object, you'll select your media server, and then on the inbound routing tab for your particular media server, you'll add in a DNS, or you'll drag and drop a DNS activity into the designer, and then you will right click on that DNS activity or object and select add condition, at which point you simply go through the prompts to add in a DNS entry for whatever number you want to attach to your workflow. And once again, just to remind ourselves, this is an example of what a DNS match will look like, or a DNS activity will look like. You'll have the actual string of digits that you want to apply to this particular workflow. So that's a very high level overview of what a workflow is inside of the MiCCB or the MCX platform. Basically, workflows are logical ordered steps through which a callable process for assignment to an agent or for additional processing that can be provided by the MiCCB. Remember, what we've talked about here is a very high level overview. You can begin getting very complicated with your workflow setups, but overall it comes down to figure out what steps you want the call to work through before or even after it's assigned to an agent, and a workflow will enable that functionality for you. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for this session, and we will see you in the next one.